Today's video is sponsored by RoboPack, the trend-setting solution for Intune packaging and third-party patch management, and it's free for SMBs and NGOs. Visit them today at robopack.com. If you're responsible for managing apps and devices in your organization, you simply have to know Microsoft Intune. And in this completely updated tutorial, I'm going to take you through everything you need to know. So you'd best buckle up. This is a good one. Greetings everyone, great to see you. I really do appreciate you dropping by. I've had tons of messages in the last few weeks saying that, Andy, we love your Intune video, but it's a little out of date. So I thought, that's a great idea. And it's so many changes have been happening over the last 12 months that I thought I'll completely refresh and update this video. So in this session, I'm going to take you through everything you're going to need to know in order to get you up and running with Microsoft Intune. How to deploy apps, how to deploy devices, what the different types of devices are that you can have in Intune, and just kind of really get the idea of how it all kind of fits together. All right. Now, if you've got any questions from this session or any of my sessions, in fact, then you know the drill. Get those down below and I would really appreciate it. And if you want more, why not consider signing up to my Patreon site? Here you'll get access to full Microsoft courses, as well as monthly Zoom calls and lots more. So without any further ado, I think it's about time we jump in. What do you say? So just to let you know where I am, my domain is in hybrid. So I'm running Entra ID Connect. And at the moment, I'm going into authentication methods for my devices. And I'm going to enable SMS. So just a short messaging service, and that will be just an additional option that I want to give my users. Of course, you don't need to, but this is just one option I'm going to do. Next, I'm going to come into all devices and just have a look at these settings here. So you'll notice that my server is in here, my domain controller, of course, because I'm in Entra ID. But I'm going to flip into device settings here. Now, at the moment, I've got no other devices in here at the moment. It's just purely Entra ID. I've not brought in any devices in. So do I want to allow my users to do an Entra join? So I can let my users join their devices, but also register devices as well. For example, bring your own device. So I'm quite happy with that. One other thing that you might want to do here is you might want to add in additional device administrators. And this can be quite useful just for kind of general management of them. It could be like a junior admin or something like that. Again, another thing to think about as well is the number of devices. So you can see that the default was 50. I've just set this to 20. I think it just makes it a little bit more manageable. We have this manage additional device administrators here. And as I said, this can be quite useful. Just, all the burden's not on a single user. So I'm going to just scroll down here and I'm going to basically just add in, I've got a user here called Alan de Jong, and Alan is going to be one of my device administrators that I'm going to use. Okay, so now that he's set up, that is the kind of the basic things that we need to do. Right, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do an Entra ID domain join from the client perspective. Okay, so from my Windows 11 machine here, I'm just logging on as an administrator or with a user who's got admin privileges. I'm going into settings and I'm coming up to here, and within settings I'm going to scroll down and find the accounts tab. And in the accounts, again, scrolling down to the bottom, you want to choose the option that says access, work and school. So clicking onto that, I now have the option to connect. So connecting is really simple. You just click onto that. Just a quick warning, at the top here, it asks you to put in your email address. That is just for kind of home users, but what we're looking at is these two options below, which will let us either join to Entra ID or Active Directory. Please note that you can't have both. You can only have one or the other. So I'm putting in my credentials. So this time I'm coming in as Joni, and Joni is an enterprise user in my network. So she's just going to log in with her username and password here. And it says, okay, make sure that this is the correct organization, obviously. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm just clicking on that, and it now just takes a few moments just to set up my machine. Now, once it's done, and it says, yep, you're all done, that's fine. A good idea is then to go and restart this machine. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to restart the machine. You can see that Joni's machine is now connected, but it does need a small restart. So I'm just going to do that, and we pick it up a few moments later, and you can see again, instead of logging in as admin this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as another user, and again I'm logging in as Joni, and just put in her password. So just pop that in and click on enter, and I now have her a desktop. And again, what I can now do is if I go into Edge or whatever browser you're using, and I just type in, let's say, office.com, and you can see that the office.com page comes up, and it now asks me to sign in. But one huge difference that you'll notice here now is that when you go ahead and sign in, you're not prompted for a username and credentials, because one of the main benefits of Entra ID join is single sign-on. So there we have it. Now, if you had to remove this workstation, again, the process is quite simple. What I'm going to do is let's just come into the admin machine, and let's just have a look at how that looks in Entra ID. So I'm coming into the users node in Entra ID. I'm going to come down into all users, and I'm going to locate Joni's account. Now, one thing that you'll see here is I'm just going to type her name in there, and one thing that you'll see is if I now click onto the device tab, just wait for this to come in. Yeah, so if I click onto the device tab here, you'll now see that sure enough, Joni's machine has now come in, and this is what we call an Entra ID join. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's managed in Intune, and the reason for that, of course, is you may not have assigned the license to the user and it's not been joined to Intune. There are a couple of things that you need to do there. So once you've joined the machine, again, the flip side there is that you might then decide, hey, Andy, can I disjoin this machine? You can see here's Joni's machine. So if Joni at any time wants to unjoin from Entra ID, she would simply go back into her account, back into those settings again, you can see, and instead of connecting, you can't connect to another organization, but what she can do is she can say, I want to now disconnect. So disconnect again. Are you sure you want to do this? Absolutely, I am. And then the final thing that it will ask you for is an email address. And in this case, you can just type in the local admin account details. All right, so now what we're going to do is have a look at the same thing now, but we're going to join Intune with our device. Okay, so to get things rolling in Intune, the first thing we need to do is go into an account and just make sure that it's licensed appropriately. So, of course, for Microsoft Intune, you're going to need a couple of licenses. Of course, you're going to need a Microsoft 365 account, possibly an E5, or make sure that you've also got this one, the Enterprise Mobility and Security one. If you've got Business Premium, of course, you also get Intune with that, and Intune can also be purchased as a separate license as well. So once you've gone ahead and done that, we just save those changes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to just flip over now into Microsoft Intune. So again, as with Entra ID, you need to enable it. So for this, I'm going to flip up here onto the device blade, and into the device blade, I'm going to come into enrollment. So you can see here it says device onboarding, and you've got two choices, all the different physical devices, and of course you've got Windows 365 as well. So I'm going to go ahead. You can see I've got Windows, Apple, I've got Android, various different options here. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple, and I'm going to use the Windows blade. So I'm clicking on automatic enrollment, and in here you've got three options. It's either off or none, some, so for some users or groups, or in this case I've enabled it now for all of my users. And you can see that you get the mobile device management terms of use. You can create that. You can get the discovery blade. Now, as well as that, so once you've enabled that, there are other settings that you can do. So for example, in this case, you might want to make some restrictions. It could be specific. You only want certain users to join. You only want certain platforms to join. Again, this can be Android, Apple, and so on. So if I put for example, a device restriction in here, you might say, an OS version or a certain age of a piece of software. But in this case, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to allow NVM. But in this case, I don't want to allow, for example, personally owned devices using Windows. So this might be a security thing for you. So again, I'm just going to click on next and just save that. And you can now see that I've put that device restriction in. And of course, there are other restrictions that you can put in as well. Okay, now we're set up. The next thing we need to do is obviously manage the device in Intune. So I'm going to just first of all flip here into Aaron's account. And as you can see in his device blade, sure enough, we can now see that that device is running Windows. And if I just scroll along a little bit, sure enough, you can now see that the MDM that we're using, mobile device management, is indeed Intune. So we're good to go. So flipping over to Intune itself, again, if I come into the devices here, we can see that we have a number of different platforms that Intune supports. So Windows, iPad, iOS, Mac OS, Android, and so on. And for my demos here, you can see I'm just working in the Windows platform, and I just have a single machine at the moment. So now that that machine has come in, and because it's now managed in Intune, absolutely you can see all the hardware, what software's on that machine, whether the device is compliant. You can see things like app configurations on there. You can see things like the local admin password, and if you need to change that, you can do that as well. So again, just flipping up to properties, you can of course change any of these items. You can see that the device itself is corporate as opposed to a personal device. Remember that restriction that we put in earlier that prevented us from joining that device. So that's kind of a good tip for that. Somebody was asking me about that recently. Now, in terms of management, if I click onto the overview blade, you can see you've got things like a remote wipe. I can delete the device, of course. I can sync the device. So if you make any changes to policy or profile settings or deploy an application, this will force that device to actually pick up those new settings. Kind of almost like group policy in Active Directory, if you will. Now you'll notice here that some of the settings are actually grayed out, and the reason for that is because you do need, for these features, you do need an additional license. That's the Intune Suite, but of course you can use third-party products as well. You can see here, if I click on the ellipse, you've got other options. I can do things like antivirus scan, and of course you can also deploy additional security features by using Defender for Endpoint here as well. So now that I've done that, the next thing that you want to do, our device is in, you might want to do some configuration settings. And as I said earlier, if you're on an Active Directory environment, you would typically do this in group policy. But of course, we don't have group policy here, but we have the next best thing. And to be honest, about 97% of Microsoft group policy settings are actually in here. So again, I'm coming down to the devices, and you can see that in here we have not only the onboarding, but we also have some managing options, things like configuration, and this is all the profile policy settings. You've got compliance, you've got conditional access, any scripts and things that you might want to run when the device logs on or user comes on. And again, you've got the group policy analytics. So this would a great tool to analyze what you've currently got and then import those settings into 365. And I've actually done a video on that previously as well. So again, one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create that configuration profile. So here in configuration, you can see that we can do it for the different platforms. I want to create a new policy. You can import one if you've got a group policy setting, of course, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it asks me for the platform that I'm using. So I'm using Windows 10 or later in this case. And then it asks me, okay, what kind of policy type or profile type do I want to use? And I've got some options. I can use the settings catalog, properties, and of course, just like group policy, we have a whole bunch of templates here. And there are just literally hundreds of different settings, but it's great that Microsoft have put them in these easy to kind of follow categories here. So now that we've got that, I'm just going to choose, for example, device restrictions. So I can click into that. But again, you're quite within your right to use other things there as well. And you can, of course, you can import those templates as well. So, yeah, I think I'll just go with the device restrictions in this case. So let's just click on create, and we'll now go ahead and give this a name. So just for the purpose of this demo, I'll just call it my sales. So just pop in here. I'll call it my Contoso restrictions, for example. And you could put in a little note. I'm just going to click on next. And here they are. These are all your different policy or profile settings that manage things like the registry settings in a device. So I can come in here and you can see things like cloud storage. I can put restrictions on that. You might want to restrict, for example, some control panel settings. So if this is a corporate device, one thing that you might not want is you might not want your users playing games. So you can see that the gaming option there, and again, I can just go in and I can say, you know, I'm going to block that. I don't really want that on my users' machines. And when the user next logs in, they will find that they're missing from the device. So now I'm just selecting which groups to include. And for this demo, again, I'm just going to bring in the sales group again. So I'm just going to say that. Of course, I can do exclusions as well. So if you want to exclude specific groups, of course, you can do that. If you want to put any device restrictions in, so do you want to, you might want to put an additional rule in for that. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to say no. So now that I've done that, I'm quite happy. So I'm just going to click on confirm, and you can see that that configuration indeed has now gone in. Now, as well as that, those group policy settings, of course, I don't have time to cover them all here. And I would definitely encourage you to go in and look at those various settings. On top of that, we also have things like compliance rules. So again, I can go in and I can do a compliance rule. So you can say only allow certain versions of software. So for example, if this was for iOS, you might only allow, up to iOS 13, for example. You might want to say nothing less than version 8 is supported. Other things that we've got, of course, you can also come in and you can deploy things like conditional access as well. And one of the cool things that you can bring in here is, for example, a terms of use. And this is really useful, especially on corporate devices, if you want to kind of really get that message of an acceptable usage policy across. So again, you just simply upload a PDF, give it a name, and you just basically select, that you want your users to accept the terms and conditions of use. Okay, so now that we've got our device in Intune, let's take a look at some of the other important settings that you might be interested in. So for example, on the dashboard here, you just get this nice kind of overview. It shows you how many devices are in compliance, what configuration settings, are there any issues with them, how many devices are enrolled, so we can see that we've just got one device at the moment, and you can see it would show you how many devices that you have here, and also the compliance status of those devices as well. So what else can you do in Intune? Well, what about other types of devices? Well, you can see here that we have got all devices. You've got things like device onboarding here, and I might say, okay, I want to get an iPad or a iOS device on, and this is fantastic for schools. It really is. So just a quick word of how this works, by the way. You go to the enrollment tab here, and one of the first things that you will need is you will need to obtain what we call an MDM push certificate. And you need to apply for this from Apple. So you just basically agree to their terms and conditions, create your certificate, sign in with your Apple ID, your corporate Apple ID. It will then generate a certificate for you. You just download that file and then install it here. You just add it and then you're good to go. So once you've done that, then you can start onboarding your devices. So again, the next thing is configuration. So just like Windows, you can come in and you can create a configuration profile. So for this demo, I'll call it my select the profile type. So again, you've got a settings catalog, and you've also got templates, which is what I'm going to choose here. So just like Windows, you've got all of these different policy and profile settings. So for example, do you want to bring in things like, do you want to restrict any features? For example, if these were iPads in a school, you would definitely want to restrict some features. Do you want to put any device restrictions in here? So again, I can come in and I can just say, I'll just call this sales. I can put in a description. If I click next, and look at this, you can see this is where you get all the different options. So do you want to put any restrictions on the App Store? Block viewing corporate documents in unmanaged apps. So for example, if you have a really important Word document, you don't want somebody using a third-party app to do that. So again, you can restrict that. So again, a lot of this, restrict airdrop and, enforce automatic enrollment, block the App Store, for example. Again, really, really useful settings here. So definitely take a look at these restrictions. Now, just while we're here on iPhone, and also with iPhone and Android, one useful thing, again, compliance, those compliance policies that I mentioned, is I can create a compliance policy. Again, I'll just call this sales. And if I click on to next, this is really useful because things like device health, you might want to block, in fact, you will want to block jailbroken devices on the network. Jailbroken devices can contain illegal software. Sometimes that software might be a bit dubious. It contains, ransomware or something nasty like that. Things like device properties itself, you might want to set restrictions on the version of the operating system, the build version, so only allow this maximum version. Do you want to enforce things like Defender for Endpoint? And with things like system security, do you want to enforce things like facial recognition, require a password, and if so, how many characters and so on? Do you want to allow biometric IDs? And this is great. You can also put in restricted applications as well. and I'll talk about apps in a second. So once you've set that up, that then is what we call a compliance policy, and Windows is virtually identical to that as well. So there we have it. Really super easy to get those devices onboarded there. And again, you've got the same configuration settings. Again, things like Mac OS, many companies are starting to use Mac OS on platforms there. So definitely take a look at those. Now, the other thing that I'm going to talk about just in a second is obviously deploying apps. So deploying apps, of course, the benefit of Intune is that you can deploy apps to all of these different platforms. And you can also then do what we call things like configuration policies for the apps. So again, you might want to restrict certain features. We've also got something called app protection policies. So again, you might want to restrict things like cut, copy, paste, or print, or being able to open documents in third-party apps and things like that. That can be really useful. So getting apps in, super easy. You can simply come into the Windows app, and again, you can, where do you want to bring in that app from? So again, you can bring it from the Microsoft Store app. You've got 365 apps here as well. You've got things like Edge, web applications. You've got things like line of business apps. And also Windows apps. And what this does is it repackages the app into what we call an Intune file. Right, so as an example, if I come into, let's say, a Windows Store app, and I'm going to say, yeah, I want to select that. I can now say, hey, which app do I want to bring in? So, you might want to say, hey, I want to bring in, let's say, Zoom. So again, I can choose Zoom here, and you can choose, obviously there's different versions of it that you can bring in. So I'm just going to bring in this one here. And this is a kind of a universal Windows app, which means it'll run on any platform. You can see it brings in the details of the app here, install behavior as a user, of course. And then, of course, you can select a category. So what kind of application is this? In this case, it might be a business application. Oh, actually, it could be a collaboration. Obviously, collaboration. There we go. So now that I've done that, again, make it this available. Do you have any information on it? Then you can fill in some information on things like the owner, the developer, and you can also select a logo for this as well. So now I click on next, it will then say, okay, you've got options. These users are required to have this application. These users, it will be available for enrolled devices, but also, again, you can also uninstall the devices as well. So you can uninstall the app, so super flexible here. So I'm going to add a group here for required. And in this case, I'm going to bring in my friends, the sales group again. So again, just bring that in. And now this app is now ready to be deployed. And off it goes. And get a quick, nice overview with that. And that application has now been deployed to those users. And you can see here, it will give me an overview of how many users actually use it. So once my users start using this, then that will start going green and so on. So of course, a big selling point of Intune is its integration with security features. So in here, for example, you can set antivirus policies for your organization. You can set disk encryption. So if you're using BitLocker, you can set things like endpoint firewall rules, last line of defense, of course. And you've also got things like great tools like surface reduction. It will make great recommendations, making sure you've got things like compliance, device compliance that I just mentioned. So definitely endpoint security is going to be something that you're going to want to take a look at. And of course, you've also got that really seamless integration with Defender for Endpoint, and you've already got the licenses. You're already licensed for it. So again, you can set those configuration settings here for that. So one of my absolute favorite features in Intune is Autopilot, and this is an absolutely must-have skill for administrators. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just heading back into devices in Intune, and I'm going back into enrollment. And here in enrollment, one of the first things that we need to do is decide how to onboard our devices. So typically you would go to a vendor like HP or Dell and you would buy 1,000 laptops, and they would provide you with a CSV file of all the serial numbers of the machines. And what I've done is I've created a group and added a rule that basically is anything with this serial number or numbers will be a member of this device group. And that's what I've done here, and you can see that. So now that I've added in the devices, the next thing is to configure the actual profiles itself. And the first thing is a deployment profile. And we refer to this sometimes as an UBI, or out-of-the-box experience. You know, when you switch your PC on for the very first time, that you can actually control that. So rather than getting all that junk that comes with the vendor, you can actually create your own. So in this case, you can see I'm just calling it my profile, and I'm saying it's user driven. And I'm also going to say I want it to be Entra ID joined. Do you want to allow the user to accept the license? Any kind of privacy settings. But in this case, you can see I've just gone ahead and hidden those just to save time, actually. Again, other things that you might want to let the user choose is, are they going to be an administrator? And in this case, I'm going to say yes for this particular user, but typically you wouldn't. You would just put them in as a standard user. You can also choose the keyboard, the language, if you want a second keyboard, and so on. So you've got the choice of this is the initial kind of out-of-the-box experience. So as I mentioned, once this then runs, what you then do is you set those configuration profiles that I showed you earlier. So any kind of restrictions in the user's environment or the computer's environment, if you want any icons missing, then again, like I showed you earlier, you would then deploy software. You would have software rules. So when this kind of out-of-the-box experience finishes, it will pick up those profiles and the apps, and basically the user is ready to go. So now all I need to do is assign this UBI to my group, my users group, and I've created a group here called IT devices, and I'm going to click on next, and there we go. You can also exclude users as well. And in this case, I'm happy with that. I've created my profile and I'm good to go. Okay, so now that I've done that, this is actually the PC that I'm going to be resetting. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to go into the the settings, and I'm going to go into reset the PC. Now, when you reset the PC, you've got two choices, of course. Do you want to keep your files and all your settings, or do you just want to wipe everything and start from fresh? And this is great, by the way, if you are in an organization and you need to hand the machine to somebody else. Do you want to do a cloud download of Windows 11, or do you want to just do a local reinstall? And in this case, I'm just going to choose the local reinstall because the local files are already there. So I'm just going to click next, and that PC will then finish. And you can see it now goes through that whole resetting the PC. Now, I have to say I've cheated a little bit here. I've gone ahead and recorded the demo. The reason being is because it does take a little bit of time, and I've kind of just cut that back a little bit. But anyway, some time passes by, and you can see that the PC does eventually come back in, and Windows 11 starts. And now again we go through the kind of startup sequence. Now you can see what's happening is any keyboard settings, any language settings that you've chosen, these are all going to be implemented. Now, of course, for security reasons, one of the things that you probably want to do is you'll need to set up additional security. So, for example, with the likes of Windows Hello. So again, the user will just go ahead and sign in. So again, once you've done that, depending on your policy, whether you want Windows Hello, it may require more from you. So Aaron is just putting in his username and his password. And again, he'll then just go ahead and sign in there. So once he's done that, again, the PC will just go through a sequence setting things up for him. So again, any kind of restrictions that you put in, these will come in here. So any user or computer kind of restrictions in those policies will come in. So once that's been set up, of course, like all things Windows at the moment, do you want to use Windows Hello? So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to say, yes, I do. And again, I've shortened this slightly as well. So that whole sequence, I've just kind of skipped there. And I'm going to just put in a PIN number for the user. Again, in this case, I'm just going to make it quite a simple one. You could make it as complex as you want. The next thing that I want to do is once we're all set, the PC will then just reboot. And as you can see, I'm now in and everything's looking good. And just to double check that I am actually in Entra ID, I'm just going to, of course, go into the accounts. And in the accounts, I'm going to go into school and workplace. And sure enough, you can see that Aaron is connected to Entra ID here. So again, other things that we can also check, I can go into my browser, and if I just go to office.com, so just like before, pure single sign-on, I just click sign in, but again, I'm not prompted in any way in order to access my applications. So there we go. That's it. That is a complete out-of-the-box experience for Windows 11 in Microsoft Intune. Well, there you have it. Microsoft Intune, deploying devices and apps and just kind of general management. Hey, listen, I really hope that you found that useful. I just thought I would, update you for 2025 and all the new things because it has really changed a lot. Listen, if you've got questions, comments, as always, get those down below. And if you've not subscribed, then go ahead, click that subscribe button up there and like the video. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy. And while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.